In 1996, I began ministering to an abused woman who was extremely broken. She'd had the most horrendous childhood and young adulthood anybody could ever imagine. And about 2 months after I began ministering to her, we went together to a women's retreat for a group of churches in another city. Our first morning there, we were in our room praying silently. She was sitting on the bed. I was sitting on a chair at a desk with my back to her, and I was praying, "Oh Lord, please give me a double portion of your Spirit." I had no sooner prayed that when she said, "I just had a vision of you and Jesus. I saw him come over to you, and he put these 2 cloaks on you. One was a red cloak for his love, and the other was a purple cloak for his majesty." Well, I was totally amazed. And that was the beginning of a relationship of ministry together, where I would minister to her for her brokenness. At the end of the ministry time, she would minister to me a word from the Lord. Sometimes it was a prophetic word, often it was a vision. Now this went on for a year before the experience I'm going to tell you about now. This particular time in 1997, she had a vision where Jesus and I were sitting together on a large rock in a meadow, and we were just talking, and suddenly he reached down and touched my feet and said, "These feet will never touch the earth again." Well, I had no idea what that meant, but for almost a year now she had been having visions for me, and they were always relational with the Lord and me, and it seemed like he was courting me. He would say lovely things. He would bring me gifts. He would bring me flowers. He would talk to me about the beauty of nature and how that he'd made this all for me to enjoy. He gave me a ring. And then a little bit later, there was a wedding ceremony where I was married to the Lord. Well, I didn't think too much about it because most of us believe we're living in the end times and that we're the bride of Christ. But then shortly after that, she had the vision where we were sitting on the rock, and he touched my feet and said, "These feet will never touch the earth again." Well, that night, when I went to bed, I was lying there in my room, waiting for sleep to come, when all of a sudden, I felt this very gentle and sweet tingling in my feet that quickly spread up my legs and the trunk of my body and into my arms. It was very rhythmic, like on a raft, riding on some gentle waves. It was just delightful. I knew that Jesus had come to me in a very special way. I knew that it was related to the vision that she'd had because it began in my feet. It was the most glorious and wonderful experience I'd ever had. I had never heard of anyone having an experience like this. I had certainly never felt such a thing. And I knew that Jesus had come to me in a very special way in the end times, and that this had something to do with his second coming. What I experienced that night never ended. That was 15 years ago, over 15 years ago, and that wonderful feeling has never left me. It has only intensified. Whenever I lie down for rest, I feel like I'm taking off in a jet plane. It's the feeling of rising up. As I study the Word and have prayed about this experience, I came to realize that that was the awakening of my spiritual body, which is the first event in the quickening of our mortal body and bringing our mortal body into perfection, into the redemption of the body. Her visions did not stop with this experience. They continued. They continued to be relational, and the Lord would touch me in some way in her visions. For example, he might put his hand on my shoulder. Well, then for the next 2 or 3 days, I would feel his hand very gently coming down on my shoulder. It's hard to describe the feeling because it's not the feeling of a physical hand coming down on a physical shoulder. It's a spiritual hand gently and very warmly coming on a spiritual shoulder. And so it's very difficult to describe what I was feeling. But it was very real. And I came to know that God was encouraging me as I felt something in my body to imagine Him with me doing this thing. Like it was easy to imagine myself sitting on the rock with Him when He touched my feet. And that tingling feeling began. So if I felt something on my shoulder, I would know that was the Lord's hand. I would envision that. So He began to develop my imagination along with the feeling of the quickening of the body. And they do go together. I think it's important for me to say that I can't tell the difference between my spiritual body and my natural body. It all feels the same to me. And I've never had any out-of-body kind of experience. I never felt myself floating to the ceiling or anything. I'm always very much aware of being on earth, but that in my imagination I can picture things in heaven, but I don't see them perfectly clearly. It's in my imagination. But what I am feeling in my body, I can see in my imagination, and it makes His presence incredibly real. I began to understand that God speaks to me through my body. I don't hear any audible words, but I learned that if God was saying yes, or it's going to be okay, I would feel like the sun was shining on my face. For example, I could be shopping for shoes. It's very difficult for me to buy shoes because they don't make the size shoe that I wear anymore. They're very narrow. They used to make narrow shoes, and now it's just kind of everything is wide or medium. But I can be trying on shoes, and when I get to the pair that's right for me, sometimes I'll feel His warmth on my face, and I know that that's the pair of shoes for me. Or sometimes I'll be looking for something at home, and I think, well, I don't even know if it's here anymore. What if I left it somewhere? If I feel warm on my face, I know that it's there in the house. And without exception, if I keep looking, I will find it. Similarly, if I begin to do something I should not do, the Lord can cause a pain to come in my body. For example, I was once walking up the hill by myself, near where we live in the mountains, and I got this terrific sharp pain in my groin. I just couldn't walk up the hill. So I walked back down the hill, and I walked other places, and I didn't have any pain. Well, that night I had a dream, and in the dream someone had abducted me when I walked up the hill by myself, and I found myself in a strange city. I didn't know how to get home, and I'd been taken captive. And so God was warning me, don't walk up there by yourself. I like to walk up the hill, but now I don't go unless my husband goes with me. So there are just many ways that the Lord can speak to us through our body. In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul speaks of the natural body. Verse 44, it is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. I had always thought that we did not get a spiritual body until we die and are ready to go to heaven. But I have learned that we have a spiritual body even now. It's just asleep. It's something that we lost at the fall. When Adam and Eve sinned, when they were cast out of the garden, they lost the spiritual side of their being. It didn't disappear, it just went to sleep, so to speak. So he says here, there is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. Not there will be a spiritual body, but there is a spiritual body. Paul continues by saying, and so it is written, the first man, Adam, was made a living soul. The last Adam was made a quickening spirit. Well, of course, that's speaking of Christ. Howbeit that was not first which is spiritual, but that which is natural, and afterward that which is spiritual. The first man is of the earth, earthy, and the second man is the Lord from heaven. As is the earthy, such are they also that are earthy, and as is the heavenly, such are they also that are heavenly. Well, I can read this whole passage, and it seems so clear to me that that which is earthy is my natural body, that which is heavenly is my spiritual body. The first man, Adam, my natural body, Christ is quickening spirit. He has come and quickened my spiritual body. He goes on and says, And as we have borne the image of the earthy, we shall also bear the image of the heavenly. Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, neither doth corruption inherit incorruption. Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. When Paul says we shall not all sleep, I believe that's saying we're not all going to die, but it also means all parts of us are not going to be sleeping. And he says, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall be changed. And this quickening of the mortal body is the beginning of that change. Because it says in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. And that's the way it was for me. One moment I didn't feel a thing, and the next moment I felt that tingling and that wave-like feeling in my feet that quickly spread over my whole body. And it's been with me ever since. And he says, at the last trump. Now, if you look up the word for trump or trumpet in the New Testament, it's from a root word which means a quavering, a reverberation. And that's how I would describe the feeling of the spiritual body being awakened. It's like a very pleasant and gentle quavering. And I believe that it's consistent throughout the book of Revelation that the trumpet has to do with the awakening of the spiritual body and the awakening of parts of us that we have not been aware of. Paul goes on and says, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. Now you can look at this two ways. You could look at the dead as being people who've died and are being raised, or you could look at it as parts of us that are dead, that at the time of the fall, our spiritual mind and our spiritual body were like dead to us. And in the end times, then, these are being raised and incorruptible. They are absolutely perfect. And we are being changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. So when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, I see this as a process. God, there was this instant change in the twinkling of an eye when my spiritual body was quickened. But I have to put on incorruption. I have to put on immortality as I choose to obey God and do what is righteous and abandon all sin and all carnality. As I've put off sin and carnality, the Lord helps me, because now that I can feel Him in my body, He can tell me the moment I even think something sinful. One time I went out on my deck to get wood to bring in for the fire. It was early in the morning, like about 4:30 in the morning. I looked up at the sky and the stars were so beautiful. I brought the wood in and stoked the fire. About an hour later I went out to get more wood. I looked up at the sky expecting to see the stars, and they were all gone. And I thought, well, that figures. Western New York, clouds are rolling in. We don't even get to see meteor showers and eclipses because of the clouds. Immediately my left eye started to itch intently, and I knew God said, you're not supposed to grumble and complain. So I repented, and the feeling immediately went away. So there's a working together of eradicating sin out of your life once that spiritual body is awakened, and the Lord can speak to you so clearly through your body. He has spoken to me about what I should not eat many times through my body. Last time I reached to get a cup of coffee, I sneezed 4 times in a row. I thought, okay, Lord, no more coffee for me. And He later confirmed that in His Word, that was what He was teaching.